The title of my video 2 days ago was Venezuelan oil could spark a huge Bitcoin pump. And ironically enough, I think for the most part, even if you watched my prediction video for 2026, I talked about the fact that more stabilized and long-term meme coins were going to do really, really well in 2026. And if you look at meme coins in 2026, Pepe, you mentioned the meme coin Bonk, Shiba, all of them are up double digits already. And more recently, we talked about the fact that the Venezuela oil situation could cause a huge Bitcoin pump. And that is exactly what happened. So I'm going to talk about what could be next for Bitcoin, cover a lot of the things that may make a huge impact into how things play out in the coming days, in the coming weeks, and what some people are saying as far as Bitcoin going back to 100,000. All that and more in today's video. If you're new here, my name is Alex, talk about crypto news, crypto passive income. If you enjoy content like that, consider subscribing. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like. Without further ado, let's jump into the video. So we started off Monday on a fantastic note. Bitcoin and a ton of altcoins are pumping. We see commodities pumping. We see the stock market pumping. Everything is essentially just turning green. And there's a lot of exciting things obviously behind that. But we talked about this already. So hopefully we're already positioned for this moment and you were able to take advantage of some of the upside. But we're going to cover kind of some of the things that are happening on a broader scale. And then look at three specific assets that I think could do really, really well based off of some of the things that are happening right now, both in commodities, in stocks, and in crypto. We'll look at that at the end of the video. So if you take a look at where the Fear and Greed Index is, it has rallied insanely from just the end of November. I mean, we're talking about a month and a half, and the Fear and Greed Index has quadrupled, which is insane to think about. I mean, the amount of fear and greed at $84,000 Bitcoin changes very, very drastically and very quickly when Bitcoin's at 94,000. And mind you, we're not even at 95,000. We're not at 100,000. We're not even back to all-time highs. And people are starting to become more neutral and soon enough will turn greedy. There's a few things obviously on the horizon that people are going to be paying attention to. And while I know the Fed rate cut decision is still a ways out, the markets are going to price it in ahead of time. We're talking about several weeks ahead of time, and we're just over 3 weeks away from that decision being made, with the majority of the market leaning towards the fact that there's not going to be a rate cut and rates are going to remain the same. That being said, we talked about in our prior video where there is a lot of optimism that there could be 3 rate cuts in the first half of 2026. So still definitely possible. There's plenty of rate cuts still out there. I mean, we're talking about the likes of no rate cut in January. We may see 1, 2, or 3 in the third one being in June. But I think they're going to see rate cuts. And I think there's going to be opportunities where people are going to look at this, front run it based off of their thesis of it being bullish or bearish. Now, on top of the entire market sentiment going up, you have supposedly the individual in the world with the highest IQ stating that the super cycle has started now. This is a person that actually has a ton of following, and he holds the highest IQ score. I don't know if that means much, but a lot of people value his opinion, having the highest IQ. In the end, it doesn't hurt having someone on the same side of you if you are of the sentiment that Bitcoin is going to rally and continuing to do so. Now, here's a couple of things that I think a lot of people are eyeing and paying attention to is this level of resistance that we've talked about before, and is primarily around the $94,000 to $95,000 range, which makes sense because it was levels of support for a long time. Even when we dipped right here, we dipped down and retested this level here a couple of times before we finally broke down below it. But this level of 94 to 95,000 is a very, very key level. You can see this massive pocket right here where things really were a bit sideways even after this downtrend. So I think what a lot of people are going to be paying attention to in the coming days is can we break above this resistance to really solidify a move to the upside? We may see, once we've gotten up here to 94, 95,000, we may see similar situation that we saw back here, except just in the opposite, right? We're going to maybe see a little bit of sideways before we break back up to 100,000. And that's going to be some of these levels that we see over here. That was a terrible drawing. I didn't know what I was trying to do with that. But that is essentially what we're seeing here is the $100,000 range. Right here is the 100K as support. And, right now it's just going to be focusing on, can we consolidate? This is on the hourly chart. So it may take a couple of days once we break and hold above this. That's the bigger question, is can we break and hold above it? Or are we going to head back down to 90,000 where we have prior resistance, which is where we broke out from? So a lot of things from a technical analysis to pay attention to. And more specifically, can Bitcoin stay between 94 and 95,000 in the coming days? Is this going to be a short-term pump or is this going to be setting up for something more long-term? But you can see the major impact that's just this weekend news had on the entire market. The total crypto market cap reclaims 3.3 trillion, up 10% just the start of the year. And it's not just crypto. Commodities also having pumped drastically since the beginning of the year. I mean, this is platinum. If we're taking a look at platinum pump, platinum is up since the end of December to even today's value is 18%. That is incredible. Obviously, probably some people tax loss harvesting or whatever it is that they were doing here as a sell-off. And a lot of assets sold off at the end of the year. And now we're seeing a huge rally. We're seeing the likes of copper at pretty much all-time highs, which is insane to think about. But I think overall, assets in general have been pumping at the beginning of 2026. So one of the things that people have been talking about is the fact that Venezuela could potentially have the biggest Bitcoin reserves. Everyone's focused obviously on the oil. The oil's worth 17 trillion. But does Venezuela potentially have 600,000 Bitcoins? Not $600,000 worth, but 600,000 Bitcoins, which would be worth about $60 billion in today's value. So that could be a ton of Bitcoin. In fact, would be double that of what the US government has, and almost as much as MicroStrategy has acquired. So this is something a lot of people have been talking about. Whether or not this is accurate is the bigger question. And here's some other things that, here's an interview from earlier today with CNBC talking about this. We'll listen to this very briefly.
To effect here, where since for going back a decade now, my reporting was back in 2017, because of spiraling inflation of the Bolivar, a lot of people had turned to cryptocurrencies, mining Ethereum and Bitcoin in their homes in order to just have a stable source of cash. But the other side of this is the fact that there are multiple reports that the government itself has been looking to evade sanctions by doing sales of oil in Tether, which they then move into Bitcoin. And so much of this market moves on sentiment. So even the promise that perhaps the U.S. government, when they came in, might seize these assets, hold on to it, that's a bull case for Bitcoin if you have a stockpile such as that that isn't being liquidated.
So that's essentially the whole idea, is that there is potentially a significant amount of Bitcoin that is held by the likes of Venezuela. Now, the bigger question is this accurate? Maybe, maybe not. This is actually an interview from September 5th of 2024. I'll leave a link to it down below, where the leader of the Venezuelan opposition proposes using Bitcoin as a national reserve asset. So, even if you don't have per se, let's just say Venezuela doesn't have a ton of Bitcoin, but the idea that Venezuela could be influenced futuristically to also acquire a lot of Bitcoin, this could be very, very big for the likes of Venezuela. So I think either side, whether they have 600,000 Bitcoins or whether there's going to be a potential for a lot of Bitcoins to be acquired and Bitcoins that aren't going to be sold on the market, this overall news was relatively bullish that a lot of people have been paying attention to. So that being said, I want to kind of pivot and talk about some of these different assets that I think have a ton of potential and some of the reasons why they are the top performing assets today when we talked about them early on, and why I still consider them to be really good opportunities. Now, mind you, there's a ton of different cryptos out there. There's a ton of different assets out there. There's just a lot of different decisions you can make. But these are three that I would highly recommend that if you haven't done any research and due diligence into them, I would recommend that you do so. So the first one is Lighter. Lighter is a perp DEX. We talked about it multiple times on the channel, but this is one that I farmed for an airdrop very early on. It did very well. I was happy with the airdrop that I received. And Lighter has a unique, very brief, basic understanding. It is a zero fee and very retail friendly, similar to how Robinhood was for stock traders. And in fact, Robinhood is a major investor in the likes of Lighter. Now, the only tokens that are currently in circulation are the ones that were airdropped to users. So there is a very limited supply, and the only existing supply that is currently tradable are ones that people have sold. And there's a large portion, I think it's about 60% of airdrop holders, that haven't sold their Lighter tokens. But what we're seeing is a ton of wallets, new wallets, going and buying Lighter. You had this with the likes of Justin Sun, even though he went and sold off. He acquired 5% of the Lighter supply, then sold off a portion of it later on to just maintain his 5%. We're seeing a ton of acquisitions and purchases of Lighter on a large scale. This isn't a couple $100,000 worth. This is millions of dollars worth of Lighter. And we saw this breakout that we saw. And when we look at this chart very briefly, we saw a lot of consolidation right here around the $2.50 range. Now we've broken above the $3 after there was announced details of potential beginning of token buybacks, which would only further cause more scarcity in the Lighter token, because not only do you have buybacks potentially, you have low supply, only 25%, and no major unlocks for a year, and most airdrop holders haven't sold, and you're seeing $1 million purchases at one go. So that, I think overall there's a lot of bullish sentiment. The biggest thing is this resistance level that we're going to see right here, where we topped out at $3.25. And at that point, it's going to go back to $3.50. And then after that, really the sky's the limit. We could be seeing a $4 Lighter. I don't know how realistic it is. A lot of that also depends on the broader market. Obviously, Bitcoin's rallied, a lot of assets have rallied, but Lighter has rallied harder than most other assets. It's up double digits. The other asset I want to talk about, I talked about this yesterday on X, that one of the biggest winners from this Venezuela oil situation is going to be SLB. It's not going to be your oil companies. It's not going to be Exxon. It's not going to be Chevron. It's not going to be ConocoPhillips or ConocoPhillips. It's going to be your infrastructure plays. And that is what SLB essentially is. They are a multinational oil field services company. They are going to be, in my opinion, one of the biggest winners. And having done more research on it, looking at different research platforms, this is one that a lot of people have picked to be a bigger winner than even Chevron, who currently exists already in Venezuela. I think there's a lot of opportunity in SLB. I think long-term, not only is it a good stock, it's just long-term has a ton of potential. And it's one that, you're not going to have, they're still going to be used regardless of whether, who wins the contracts. And so when you look at the gains, they've outperformed Chevron, they've outperformed Halliburton, they've outperformed Exxon, they've outperformed ConocoPhillips. That is just, you have to find the clear winners. And we talked about this one early. It was up like 16% pre-market trading. So it was a really, really good opportunity. And the last thing I want to highlight is silver. Silver has been one of the biggest performing assets for commodities in 2025. I think that will roll over into 2026. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people that are not realizing the difference of paper versus reality. So what people are actually paying for silver, for actual hard silver in Japan, is $130 an ounce, in UAE $115 an ounce, in China $110 an ounce. That is drastically higher than paper silver. So there is a very vast disparagement in the price between the real actual asset and paper trading silver. I think a lot of that is due to how banks are and the ability for banks to be able to leverage certain positions to keep the price down, while the asset itself, the hard asset itself, has a lot more value. I think eventually this is in my opinion, this is somewhat of a pressure cooker. If there's enough pressure built up, silver could go to $100. That is a huge if, though. We're already seeing other assets go up. We're seeing other commodities go up. Silver, I think, is under a lot more pressure than we're seeing some of these other assets, due to not only what is happening, but also what people are paying for this, and the value that's already derived. And you have some kind of interesting perspectives where people talk about crazy numbers of a $500 silver, which is funny coming from someone whose Twitter title is "Make Gold Great." But either way, I think long term there's a lot of opportunity. The biggest thing most people need to be paying attention to is this meeting that is going to be coming up with Trump's administration, meeting with some of the oil conglomerates for Venezuela, U.S. companies, and the potential of Venezuela. So keep an eye on this. This could be another huge catalyst. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the current state of the market. Do you think we continue this rally? Do you think this is short-lived and will turn around? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like. Enjoy content like this, consider subscribing. Until next time, guys, stay invested.